thing on? I need to get my good side. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Top Shelf Gaming and Tech. I'm Chevy, and we're going to take a little dive and look into the PlayStation Vita. We did that before with the 3DS and the PlayStation Vita, I know, but this time around I'm going to take a look at the Model 1 and Model 2 revision of the PlayStation Vita and the differences between both of them. Alright, so yes, the PlayStation Vita is my gaming handheld of all time, and plenty of other people's gaming handheld of all time, and there's a reason for that, because they're freaking awesome. Alright guys, without further ado, let's dive into this. Alright guys, here we go, the Model 2 and the Model 1 PlayStation Vita. Now, full disclaimer, before I get into any of this, I'm a little more biased towards the Model 1 Vita as a whole, for quite a few reasons actually. It's my version that I prefer the most between the two, but it doesn't necessarily make it better, and I'll explain why here. Now, as I said, there are some pros and cons between both. For the Model 1 Vita, a good example is the quality of the 5-inch 960 by 544p OLED display they use is nothing short of amazing. The colors just pop and they look more vibrant than ever and make for an excellent gaming experience, as well as other source of media being displayed on this device. It's really that good. That for me is a con of the PS Vita Slim, unfortunately. And it's still a decent display, don't get me wrong, but this one kind of sports a LCD IPS display. Now it's still good, but the colors are a little more washed out, and it's not as crisp as the OLED display in the original, and it sports quite a bit brighter of a backlit screen, which actually helps saturate the colors that you normally wouldn't have saturated on the older model. So that's about the only thing there. It still supports the 960 by 544p resolution, which really essentially is just basically a small little mini HD screen. And you know, the resolution is amazing on either one, and you really have to see them side by side to notice the difference. So it's not going to be a big deal when you're gaming just on the Slim yourself. And the 5-inch screen at that resolution looks amazing. I mean, especially if you compare it to the likes of the 3DS screen quality, it really is a night and day difference there. Alright, now when they did the transition to the Model 2, of course, they went with a slimmer design, and that's exactly what we got, by about 3mm. The Model 2 is about 50mm thick versus the Model 1's 18mm thick. And also the weight difference and overall feel of the console is lighter, with the Slim coming in at around 219 grams versus the Model 1's hefty 260 grams. And the major reasoning behind that is the difference in screens previously mentioned, as well as cutting costs on higher end exterior and interior engineering. Basically, the Slim Vita remains the same tech and processor wise, but it sports a much cheaper plastic look than its predecessor. As you can tell here, you can just look at the aluminum and kind of metal look. It's not all aluminum, of course, but it's got kind of a metal texture. These are actually metal buttons. Yeah. So it just makes for a more premium console all around. And another thing of note is the difference in buttons. Not so much the analog control or even the D-pad, as well as the X and square and triangle buttons and all that, but it's more or less the home button, select and start. They've gotten a revamp to a more rounded look, as you can see here. And they kind of protrude out of the console, so they are easier to press. Yeah, so whereas the Model 1, it's got oval buttons, and a lot of people would actually complain that these were hard to press. And I don't know, I didn't really have an issue with this, so it wasn't too big of a deal for me. But yeah, since these are oval and they're literally flat, so they don't protrude out of the console, so I think that's why people kind of were a little bit annoyed with these buttons. Again, like I said, I don't have an issue with them, and I'll put up with it for the OLED screen, so that's just me. Now, when you get to the top, there's a difference in the top of both consoles here. Now this has a power button and an LED indicating that it's on for the power, whereas this has the power button, but there's no LED there. It actually has the home button illuminating blue, whereas the home button on the Model 2 doesn't illuminate at all. So there's just a couple subtle differences there. Nothing huge, but that's about, you know, the differences, the extent of the differences there, and the fact that the buttons are plastic on the top versus metal ones on the Model 1 Vita. So, and another thing of note, on the top of the PS Vita Model 2, there's just a cart slot here, and it's essentially the same as the Model 1, except in the Model 1 it has a cart port as well as a serial port embedded into it here. And you can see right here, I'll just open it up. There's the serial port. Now, it's funny because with the serial port, they never really utilized it, like the engineers who designed the Vita. And it was planned at some point that they were going to have some proprietary cable of some sort that was going to be used to basically stream the image of your Vita to your TV. But it never really happened, and instead a couple years down the road, Sony made the PlayStation TV anyways, which essentially is a Vita. So, with less features of course, and no touch aspects and whatnot, since you pair your PS3 controller or your PS4 controller for use with it. Alright, alas, the Vita has some drawbacks, unfortunately, and one of them being, you guessed it, the proprietary memory card, made just for the Vita. Kind of like the Memory Stick Pro Duo back in the day on the PSP, and Sony also used that Memory Stick Duo in their cameras as well. So they definitely have a history with doing stuff like this, and doing proprietary memory costs a company more than if they were to use just a regular standard across the board memory, such as SD cards, which are an industry standard anyways, and they have been for some time. But Sony made their own memory, which unfortunately was inevitably their downfall and partially contributed to the Vita failing in North America. It's not a fail to many, and myself included, as I still play and buy games for it to this day. But commercially, it is a fail here, unfortunately, since just before buying the games, you have to pretty much shell out a few $100s to get a PS Vita if you're looking at getting a new one. And that's also, you know, including at least a 4 gig or an 8 gig memory card, which is proprietary. So they kind of, you get raked over the coals a little bit there. And the Model 1 also has a drawback over the Model 2, and that's a proprietary charge cord. Now this, unfortunately, that's the only way you can charge this is with the proprietary charge cord that comes with it. So you don't really want to lose it. It makes it cumbersome to find another, and you pretty much have to resort to going online and getting it. So the Model 2 kind of has one up on the Model 1, where it uses a micro USB, which is excellent, since they're used for pretty much any Android device known to man, as well as your PS4 controllers. So at least if you lose the cord, you can easily get another one. And you don't have to wait to charge your system. Sony smartened up with this Model 2, thankfully. Now, another thing to note is that the Model 2 actually has a gig of onboard memory, so you can actually start playing this right away out of the box and saving games and stuff like that without the use of a memory card. When you do happen to get a memory card for it, it then transfer those said saves over to the other memory card, and then you start saving all your game data on that memory card instead of the system's memory. So that's just one difference from the Model 1. You do not get that functionality with the Model 1. There is no embedded memory card onto the board. So unfortunately for people with Model 1, you do have to have a memory card to save your games. Which really, when you get into the Vita, you're going to want that memory card anyways, so I even suggest people to try and find a memory card for the Model 2 right away. it's just a nice touch that when you get this, you can actually save a game right away. Like if you get Persona 4 Golden and a Slim Vita, you know you can at least save it right away without actually having a memory card in the console. So another welcoming thing is the use of Bluetooth functionality in these, and that is awesome because they're good for anything Bluetooth capable, like wireless headsets and Bluetooth speakers, which I also have, and I use this feature often while playing. So it's really nice to actually be able to do that with a handheld. Not many handhelds will, well, really utilize Bluetooth technology, crazy enough. The Switch doesn't even use Bluetooth, which blows my mind. I think you can get adapters for it to use Bluetooth, but it should just be built in. It's 2018, and these had them built in back in 2012, so come on, guys. But anyways, moving on. The remote play feature with this is also nicely done, and it works well. If your TV's in use and you just want to jam on some PS4, you can do that. And you can utilize the touchpads on the rear for the R3 and L3 button presses that normally use the joystick functionality, and as well as the L2 and R2. So it's kind of like on the back of the Vita here, that would technically be your L2, R2, and then your R3, L3. I think you can change them around as well. But it definitely makes it awkward to use while playing like games like that on the Vita, especially if like you're doing first-person shooters using the R3 joystick press to run. It's just, I don't know, I can never get used to that. So usually if I'm doing remote play, I can find my remote play to like JRPGs and stuff like that don't really require the extra use of those said buttons. Other than that, I really just use my Vita to play Vita games. And speaking of which, there are plenty of games to be had just in North America alone on the Vita. But this handheld is region free. That's the biggest thing on this thing that makes it so awesome, because you can literally import any game you want to play on it in any country. So if that game wasn't released in your country but got a release elsewhere, you can play it in your console. Same with digital only releases on the PSN store. In some countries, that same game is available physically for all you collectors out there, which I know there's a ton. Just something to think about while while you're getting into the Vita. And a good example of that is we got the digital release of Secret of Mana, and I think Asia got a physical release that's obviously in Japanese, but it's English translated for the text, so it's definitely worth importing that game to have it physically on your shelf if you want to. So all in all, a solid handheld indeed, and one that shouldn't be missed by any gamer. And it does seem that the PlayStation Vita has gone the way of the Dreamcast as of late, but many people, and myself included in on this, consider it to be one of the most underrated handheld consoles of all time, and it deserves way more attention. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Would you go for a Model 1, or would you settle for a Model 2? I mean, in the end, it doesn't matter which model of PlayStation Vita you're gaming on, as long as you're gaming on one. I'm Chevy from Top Shelf Gaming and Tech Reviews, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.